On air. Cool. So Philip, hello once again. Thank you for coming for this interview. Can you start by briefly introducing yourself to the audience, those who will be looking at this interview?
Sure, absolutely. My name is Philip Smith. I live in Wales in the UK, which is not London, but it's near enough. And I was a builder class intern for 3 months between July and September in 2014.
Nice. So can you tell me first, how did you come up with this idea of coming to India to this company? How did it actually happen?
So in 2013, I graduated. I'm a psychology graduate, and I had an idea about spending some time abroad in a working environment. It was something that I'd always wanted to do. And even though I was a psychology graduate, I didn't really have I didn't really have a drive to be in a psychology related environment. I wanted to try something a bit more perhaps business related, something a little bit more open. So really the idea came from I started my master's degree and I got comfortable, and I said, okay, well, next summer I'm going to do exactly that. I'm going to spend it abroad. And I was put in contact with a student organization called ISEC, which I'm sure you must be familiar with by now. And it was through them the opportunity of taking up a social entrepreneurship related internship arose. And I wasn't really familiar with what social entrepreneurship was exactly, but I had it explained to me a little. And I thought, well, that sounds like something I would like to do. At this point, there was no clear picture. I didn't know what that was going to look like. And I hadn't chosen to come to India by this point, but I stayed open-minded and I said, well, why not try something different? And so as I got through the application process, I was then put in touch with, or shall we say, my application was opened up to ISEC interns in other countries, and it just so happened that an ISEC intern in ISM Dhanbad named Vipul Mayak, he was the first to get in contact with me, and I really, it's to his credit that it was Dhanbad that I came to, because I had intentions at that point to go to China because I was learning to speak Mandarin, but I thought to myself, India, I never thought of that. That sounds like a fantastic idea. And he really convinced me, and he wasn't really trying to sell anything to me. He was very sincere and very honest, and I had a feeling that that what he was telling me is what I was going to see when I arrived, and that's absolutely the case. So I arrive. I still don't know what this internship is going to look like, but in the simplest way possible, I was actually not supposed to be working with builder class. This was not my internship. There was some delays and some, I guess you could say, some problems with the internship that I was meant to be on. So I met Abhishek Chakraborty and his lovely wife, Sucharita, and it really is to their credit that they took me on, because I was ready to work when I arrived in India, but there were some delays, so I was left with very little to do at that point. And so I joined them instead, and I started working with Builder Class, and it was stimulating from day one. I think it was a really, really good thing that happened.
Okay, so before we dive deep into what you were doing in Builder Class now, can you tell a little bit about the experience with India? So what were your expectations? What was the image about India you had, if you had one? And was it really aligned with what you saw here?
I would say it was. I can tell you that on the day that I went to the airport, all I knew was that I would be spending over 2 months in India, and that I didn't know what anything was going to look like. And I really enjoy telling this story because my father, he gave me a ride to the airport, and then he said, "Okay, I'll see you in 2 months," and he left. And so I'm in the airport, and I'm not fearful. It's not fearful, but there was an adrenaline that existed because I didn't know what to expect. Of course, I had images of what India would look like, and I knew that it was going to be very different from the UK. But, like, for instance, I mean, you can't really ignore the level of poverty, for instance, that exists, that you see on a day-to-day basis. So that was the strongest image that I had in mind. I knew that there was going to be a lot of poverty, and I knew that there were going to be people, including children, who lived, in circumstances that I, as a Westerner, would call unfortunate. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure many people agree. So I knew I was going to be walking into that, and I knew that was going to be an eye-opening experience, which it certainly was. And I arrived in Kolkata, which is a fascinating city, of course, and I can just remember seeing this very wonderful mixture of noise and, a real busy environment, lots of people. I mean, the traffic, for instance. I mean, these are just things that you can't ignore. They're right in your face. But it was, I think, approaching everything with an open mind was a really appropriate way to go. There's no point in there was nothing to be frightened of, for instance. There's nothing to be frightened of. It's a situation that demands that you be open-minded. Otherwise, you're an ignorant traveler. And that's certainly not what I wanted to be. That's not what I aim to do.
So with this open mind, was there something that really, shocked you in either a negative or positive way, which was completely something you were not ready to see and to experience?
When I took the train from Kolkata to Dhanbad, which would have probably been about 6 or 7 hours after I had arrived. Mm-hmm. We arrived in Dhanbad, and probably at about 3 a.m. in the morning, and the rickshaws are waiting for us, and we have our suitcases, and I noticed I noticed you could see that there were lots of people outside of the station who were sleeping on the stone floor. They didn't have a pillow. I think they probably had a sheet of some kind to lay their head on. And by this point, I was very tired. It was a long day. It had been a long day's travel. And my mind didn't really register straight away with what was going on. And I just thought, typical Westerner, I just thought, oh, they must be waiting for a train. And so we get on the rickshaw, and we drive off. And a couple of days later, it was probably about a week or so later, Vipul, who I told you about, who's now a very good friend of mine, he took us back to the train station, and I think we went to get some food. But we spent some time around the train station, and he explained, no, these people are not waiting for a train. They live here, pretty much. And that was quite a powerful image. It was just one of those things where you just thought, wow, there really is nothing they can do about that.
Mm.
That's a reality, and there's nobody. And of course, there are people homeless where I live, but you don't see them sleeping on the train station. It's a very different image. And there were children there, very young children, and there's nothing you can do. So that was tough. That was really tough, because you'd like to think there's some sort of resolution for these sorts of things. You'd sort of think, well, is somebody looking out for them? Is somebody taking care of them? No, and that's the end of it. So yeah, that I would say was the big one. That was a big one for me.
So it was right in your face in the field if you've been here.
Oh yeah. Actually, there's another thing. So that happened very early on when I was in Dunbad, and the next thing in particular, the next situation that characterizes what I perhaps wasn't ready for. There was, outside of the builder class office, I would quite frequently go and get a Pepsi in between working, and just to stand outside, watch the traffic go by, and there would be a boy, a very small boy, very dirty looking, who would ask for money, and day after day after day I had to ignore him. I was told to ignore him, and because allegedly he's passing on the money to the coal mafia who are living in Dunbad. Okay, well, that's fair. I was by myself one day and this happened, and I thought, well, trying to do some goodwill, I thought, well, I'm not going to give him money. If he wants a drink or something, I'll buy him that. Which is something that you now see people doing a lot in the UK. So I did exactly that. I took him to the shop where I would go and get Pepsi, and I said, he understood what I was doing as well, and I just said, choose whatever you want. Well, the shopkeeper's wife wasn't the shopkeeper. He wasn't there. He probably would have said to me, "Oh, look, don't do that." His wife was really not amused. Really not amused. Really thought I was obviously, she really seemed to think I was making trouble for her, and she didn't speak English. And she told a companion of mine that I shouldn't do what I was doing, that it just wasn't the right thing to do. She's really angry. She was acting as though she was the one who was being taken advantage of, and I just didn't understand it. I mean, I just thought, and I spoke very, very little Hindi, and not enough to hold a conversation. And I think I probably I didn't lose my temper, but I lost my cool with her. And I just sort of said, like, okay, are you gonna let this go now? Are you gonna let it go? I get it. Like, I get it. I shouldn't have done that, but you could probably let this go too. And she probably recognized the angst in my voice, and that was the end of that. But I just thought, and working with builder class as well, where you're focusing on children and women, it was a sensitive issue, and not a nice one either. It wasn't nice.
It's an interesting point of view of how, again, like a typical Westerner, as you call yourself, would look at it. Okay, so there is something I would like to come back from this topic later on in our conversation. But before that, can you also clear out for the audience what exactly you were doing in Build a Class? What was the project? And what kind of experience was it for you there?
So the project, in the simplest way to explain it, I did not do any field work. Well, I did very little field work when I was working with Builder Class. The focus of the project was actually to organize an event, which Abhishek named the Connection Summit. And the idea of this was that we were raising awareness of the importance of corporate social responsibility. That was one element of it. The other element was sort of raising entrepreneurial spirit among high achieving university students, I guess you could say. So the corporate social responsibility part was something which was a very important issue for young startups, which of course Builder Class, you could probably say, is still a young startup. That was one element. And also, of course, Dhanbad is home to Indian School of Mines. And when I was spending time with the engineering students, mining engineering students, yeah, that was their field of study, but a lot of them had interest in business, and Indian School of Mines has a business division, I believe. So we organized an event where we could invite business corporate figures to come and speak, talk about their experiences, and also talk about their views of corporate social responsibility, which of course is which every company in India, corporate company, has to give a percentage of their annual earnings to social causes. And the reason I say that is because that's very distinct from charities. Excuse me, it has got really bright in here. Hold on.
Sure.
Okay, so that was the so that's what we were trying to communicate to students, that this is not charity money. This is money that could be used by innovative young professionals who want to make a difference in their community and make a difference in India. So the majority of my responsibility was made up of contacting corporate officials who were connected with Abhishek and asking them to come along and perhaps speak, if not attend the event as an official, and allow them to offer their business experience and also their views on corporate social responsibility. As part of this event as well, we gave several students the opportunity to pitch their idea, their business idea, business plan to the audience of corporate figures, so that they could potentially come away with some funding immediately as a result of the event. So it was very, very good, very, very good cause. And it was very good for me because I gained very valuable, I guess you could say I gained very valuable public relations experience, which was something that I had wanted to develop. My interest in business is very abstract because I'm not a business graduate. So I have no academic understanding of business, but I was keen to gain some applied experience in that field. So it was very valuable. Yeah.
So you mentioned that 2 points you were trying to raise awareness for was entrepreneurial spirit and social responsibility. So based on your view on what you saw here, would you say that these 2 things are actually on the high level in the minds of Indians here? Or is it like lower, for example, compared with the UK?
I would say that it is higher up in the mindset in India. My understanding is that India is home to the largest number of entrepreneurial startups in the world. And I assume, based on that, certainly with the people that I spoke to, that this was something that they were concerned with. That it is it's it's obviously no secret that there's a lot of poverty and deprivation across India, and my understanding was that they knew that entrepreneurial spirit is going to be imperative for tackling social issues in India. And certainly from where I was standing, certainly from seeing the work that Builder Class does, I would say it is in action. I hope it is widespread in India. I would be very surprised if it's not. From where I was standing, it seemed the case.
I would actually agree with this point. Maybe also with more thinking about what exactly kind of mindset it is, like conscious striving for the social responsibility, or more of a fashion for that in trend. What do you think about it?
I do believe, I do hope that it is something which is being more and more attention is being paid to it. From a lot of the students, I spoke to a lot of students. Naturally, I spoke to a lot of students during my time in Dhanbad because I was very close, exactly where you are. I was right next to ISM. It seemed to me that students are more mindful of the fact that if they apply themselves and if they are willing to follow a less conventional path, then they can build for themselves a very rewarding career in the form of their own business and impact on society at the same time, as opposed to following a conventional Indian career. And of course, the two careers which are held at the top of Indian public opinion are medicine and engineering. And it seemed to me that a lot of students were discontented with the idea of following that path because their parents wanted them, or their parents want them to follow that path. I mean, this is naturally an idea that I'm resistant to, being British, because that's not a dominant ideal. Your parents, I'm sure it's the same in Russia. Parents are not really occupied with the idea of their children following a very specific career path, almost for their benefit. It seems the idea is changing in India. I hope it is. And you are from Russia. I didn't get that wrong.
I'm from what?
Are you from Russia? I had it in.
Yeah.
Good. I was afraid that I got that wrong then. Sorry.
That was exactly the right mention. There is a connection sometimes missing. I hope, like in the end of the interview, it will, especially if I will edit a little bit in the video, I hope it will be hearable and visible. So anyway, whatever you said leaves a positive hope, I would say, for the Indian society. But tell me, previously you mentioned that, for example, in that conversation with the lady in the shop, you obviously had some language barrier over here, not speaking Hindi, and most of the people here not speaking English. So was it a problem in your work, in your daily communications here? And if so, how did you tackle it?
In my immediate working environment, it was not a huge problem. Mainly because, well, on one level, the people who I was contacting, the easiest way to explain it is, it seems to me that the business language in India is English. That seems to be the case for me, because there wasn't a single person I spoke to on the phone or emailed with who didn't understand what I was saying. And of course, I think it's very fair to say that most Indians who learn English are very eloquently spoken, very, very well spoken, which was wonderful. So all of the Isaac interns, who were like my first level contacts, if you will, there was no problem with the language whatsoever. And then, of course, communicating with Mr. Abhishek and Sucharita, no problem there. People I spoke with on the phone, no problem. They operate they have corporate positions. There was occasionally a little bit of a language barrier with some of the people I shared the office with in Builder class, but I suspect that was more to do with shyness than actual non-understanding of English. The only time really that it was, well, on the few occasions that I did visit the school sites outside of the city, yeah, naturally there was a language barrier because the school children had a somewhat regimented understanding of English. They knew how to say, my name is, and I'm how many years old? I don't recall there being too much of a language barrier with some of the school workers, but of course I had very little contact with them. On a day-to-day basis, so with local people, let's say having to buy fruit or buying, Pepsi at the market, yeah, there was a slight language barrier. That was easy to overcome. Oh, and my favorite example, which was naturally, and I know you've had exactly the same thing, it's naturally a concern when I first got there, having to rely on auto rickshaws for transport. And what would you say? What would you, how do you go about it? Well, thankfully, as you know, city center in Hindi is city center, so that was taken care of. I'm trying to remember, I'm ashamed to say that I don't remember very many names of the places that I went to, but I traveled to different places in auto rickshaw frequently. And I did learn how to say, can you take me to? Of course, simple, practical Hindi phrases. Actually, after a couple of months, I would have been, if I was staying long term, if I had stayed longer than 3 months and I had more free time, I would have really made more of an effort to learn Hindi because people were readily willing to teach you. It was great. It was really, really great. That's how I overcome it. So there wasn't too much of a barrier, but where there was a barrier, you could deal with it just by knowing simple phrases.
Okay, then, if not the language barrier, what was or what were the biggest challenges you faced here that was really tough and difficult to overcome? Would it be a professional or personal, daily ones?
The working environment was very different from the British working environment. I think we're more reliant on structure. We sort of understand that, sort of 9 till 5 working time is so rigid in our culture that we sort of know that things have to be done in that time bracket. And then more importantly, when 5 o'clock comes, you're off. You can do what you want. Well, this doesn't happen. This didn't happen when I was working with Builder class. It wasn't really an issue until I became tired or frustrated. I was frustrated with something because when that time bracket is more flexible, then the time it takes to complete certain tasks also becomes more flexible and more ambiguous. And I think occasionally I lost the ability to approach that with an open mind, and I became very frustrated very quickly. And I mean, nothing you can't solve by having a beer afterwards and a long sleep, but particularly when we were approaching the date for the event, that did become challenging. So what did that look like? It meant that you probably might not start work until about 11, 12 o'clock in the day, which is very late for us. And quite often you would finish working at 6, perhaps even 7, is when you would leave the office, but then perhaps that was the best time to meet a guest who could attend the event, or a university professor who could speak. And so add 2 more hours to that, where you would travel to somebody's house, which that is not a problem. That wasn't a problem if I like to be prepared for things. I like to have a little bit. That doesn't mean I prepare thoroughly. It means that if I know something's going to happen, like I'm going to meet someone later on after work, I have a little bit of time to mentally prepare for it and sort of compose myself. But this was something that, in hindsight, this is something that was completely within my control. If I was able to, what would I do differently? Just keep retaining a calm and a calm demeanor. Not demeanor. Demeanor is the wrong word. Keep a calm frame of mind. Keep a calm and open frame of mind, and go with it. The reason I say that, even though this was an issue for me, is that there were no real consequences as a result of it. I had plenty of free time, and I think I was often just getting worked up, as we say, for nothing. I think it was just because we're used to that working structure in the UK. I think that maybe that was one problem. I wonder if can I think of anything else? That was the one that stands out in my mind. Perhaps something else will come to me. Something will, as we talk more, something else will come to me.
Sure. So talking about this stuff, after staying here and in this kind of working environment for 3 months, didn't you get used to it so that when you returned back to the UK, you had to reintegrate into the original working structure?
You could say that. Yeah. Yes. Oh, that's funny when you say that now, because yeah, you were. I guess you could say, when I was in India, I was willing to do. I was willing to do anything really, because I wanted to do a good job, and since there was you could say there was a lack of structure that I was used to, I might as well have did whatever I could to be even more helpful. Because I enjoyed working with builder class so much, and I understood that I was there in India to work, I passed up on opportunities to travel elsewhere. So quite frequently other interns who were on a completely different project would travel to different cities. They even got as far as Delhi on one occasion. I passed up on those opportunities to focus more on the work, which is not something I regret whatsoever. I think when I reintegrated back into the UK, I probably did retain some of that mindset of going above and beyond. I don't think it had too many consequences. I am of the belief, however, that you draw a line somewhere. Now that I'm a little bit older, I was 22 when I was in India. Now I'm 24, 25 this year. If I had an opportunity to work in India again, I would have to say that I would put my foot down more, and I would say I'm willing to go above and beyond, but we have to draw a line after a certain point, because otherwise I will be too stressed and I will not be of any use to you in this state. we have to do that in the UK. We have to do that, because otherwise you aren't of use to anyone. Because if you try to people please all the time, and I certainly did do that in India, and then you can start to work against you. Maybe that's what it looks like in the UK context. It looks like people pleasing. In context, I wonder if perhaps it is going above and beyond. You do put in more hours after your working time to get the job done. I would actually be interested to see if I ever go back to India and do it again. I'd like to see what I would do differently.
That's an interesting way to try to imagine it. Like, after all, I guess even in the UK, maybe in some small startups, not in the big corporations, would you also have this culture of going beyond, or it's a typical national culture?
Well, now when you say, I'm not really all too familiar with the startup environment in the UK, but I think you do devote, if it's your startup, yes, you will probably be devoting a lot more time. You would probably be devoting the majority of your time to your business, of course. Most entrepreneurs would also be essential for them to allocate a certain amount of time for themselves, because otherwise they will get disheartened, or they will burn out too soon, or they'll start to lose their productivity, that sort of thing. I suppose then in that respect, it's about finding that balance. And my observation is that there was less of that balance when I was working in India, but it perhaps isn't appropriate to generalize that to, well, it's not appropriate to generalize that to all Indian startups. But and it wasn't like that all the time with Build It Class, but when things got busier, yes, it was like that a great deal of the time.
I see. Okay, so like, if this kind of working culture was one of the main challenges, can you try to recall what instead was the highest, moment and the brightest memories of the whole experience?
On the day of the event, when we saw it being executed in action, and we saw how much money we had raised for the cause, and how genuinely impassioned students at the university were, that was a kind of moment where you realized, this works. This was the right thing to do. This is having a real impact. That was a very, very proud moment for me, to actually see that the internship was as valuable as I felt it was. So I learned a lot in that time. Personally, I love spending time in other cultures, and after becoming settled in India, I just loved spending time with the ISM students. I loved listening to how different Britain and India obviously have some sort of unique relationship because of the British Raj. So perhaps in that respect, there was some solidarity to be shared with the students. But I really valued. What I'm trying to say is the students who I came to be friends with, and there were quite a few I became friends with, they were ready to remind you of your strengths, but also your areas of improvement as well. So what I'm trying to say is I learned a lot about myself in 3 months that I spent in India, because I was an intern in the working environment with Builder Class. I had a very good relationship. I still have a very good relationship with Abhishek and Sucharita, who were willing to nurture me and bring me into their working environment and show me so much that I could learn from. And then the friends who I made, who were able to help me develop professionally and personally as well. It was very emotional leaving India afterwards, because it was, on the one hand, I was ready to return home, and on the other hand, I would have liked to have stayed longer to have seen what else I could have learned.
You mentioned the impact you saw of the event when you saw the faces of students being passionate about it. And what exactly would you describe as the impact of this event?
I'm sorry, Vlad, I didn't hear that question. That time it was a little...
Yeah, sure. You mentioned the
There you go.
you saw, which was like kind of the reward for the whole for the efforts. But what exactly would you describe as an impact of this event and of this project?
I'm so sorry, Vlad. I can't hear you very well.
Let's begin. Can you hear me now?
Perfect.
Cool. So I'll just try to keep my microphone closer. So, apart from students' faces on the event being passionate and curious and excited, which is obviously a sign of a really good prepared event, how exactly would you describe the impact it did on whatever the target audience was?
Well, taking the ISM students in particular, while you could tell that some of the students had thought about, they had clearly thought about taking up a path that was different from becoming an engineer. Perhaps maybe they didn't know what that would look like. And after the event, it seemed as though a lot of them felt differently towards that. They felt as though that this was a path that they could pursue. So students who knew that they had a good education, they were at a very prestigious institution, and I'm pretty sure that a lot of them felt empowered to act on ideas that they may have had, or if that they weren't, I think perhaps it would be ambitious to suggest that they were ready to act on them right now, but in 5 years' time, maybe they will remember the Connection Summit, and maybe that will be one of the many things that will influence them to take up their own startup, and perhaps then, they can begin to have an impact on, society, such like the poverty in India, for instance. That's what I hope. I'm pretty sure I saw that. And it was also nice on the other side of that to see that corporate figures understood the importance of this as well. There were some academics there who commented on the importance of that, but of course they're somewhat on the sideline. They might be a researcher, but they're not the ones who can act on it. They just provide the information. So business in general is held at very high status in India. So for high-ranking business officials to be telling students, yes, you can do this, yes, it is possible, and you can have a positive impact on yourself, your own life, but also the lives of others. And I do remember one academic, Professor Swapan Garin, who's a very good friend of Abhishek's, and I went to his home outside of Dhanbad as well. I can remember when he was speaking, saying, he was talking about corporate social responsibility in particular, and he said, this money is sitting here, protected by legislation, so nobody can abuse it. You can't give it away to charity. It has to be given to people who have started worthy causes. And he just said, why don't you go out and do something with it? And I think he had a round of applause, especially. He had several rounds of applause in his speech because there was just like an awakening. And the students were just like, "Oh my God, it's real," you know. So we don't have to struggle as much as we think because there's money sitting there. That was a pretty good moment. Really, really enjoyed that.
It would have been interesting, to now interview maybe some of the attendees of the events to figure out either they took it forward somewhere or not.
You might be able to.
Maybe we can do it. Excuse me, give me one second. I will just close the door.
Oh, miss.
Prevent some noise.
Okay. Why is this? Go.
Right.
Oh, it's still recording.
Yeah, it's still recording, but fortunately I can edit the video.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I was planning to split it into the parts and post it, one by one, some most interesting glimpses, and maybe in the end the whole interview, which I assume no one will watch the whole 30 minutes interview whatsoever. So
that's understandable.
Yeah, but I just had to turn off microphone constantly because there was some noise from the other part of the flat. So
Sure.
Anyway, what we're talking, the impact. So apart from the event, you mentioned that a couple of times you went to the field. Can you briefly tell about that? What was it for and what you were doing there?
So it was basically, it was out of Abhishek and Sucharita's kindness, really, that I got to see the fields. So what did that look like? We went to several schools outside of the city area. The names, unfortunately, I don't remember. I don't think I even remembered them at the time. But we visited several schools outside of Dhanbad that were involved in the build a class
Yeah.
initiative. So essentially, I know that their involvement, the school's involvement with Build a Class, was to raise the level of education, or at least attempt to do so, whilst also involving the mothers as well, I guess you could say, for a more holistic and more valuable educational experience. So to see that in action, to actually see that that's what they were doing, was wonderful. There is a photo I have somewhere, which now that we're talking about it, I'm going to have to get it framed because it was from one of the visits, and Abhishek took the photo. And these kids who were probably between the ages of about 7 to 11, this one particular school, were just so delighted to see not just me. I was with 2 other interns. I was with Hannah, who is from London, and Nora, who was from Germany. I'm not sure where in Germany. We went out on a visit together, and of course, in the plainest possible words, we're 3 white foreigners. And they knew we were working here in India, and they were just so delighted to see us, to know, the message that we were trying to channel was, we are from a completely different world, but we care, and that's why we're here, and this is the message that we're trying to bring out. And yeah, they must have felt that way. They were really, really delighted to see us. I can remember Nora actually found the experience to be very unsettling because she felt, and I won't talk too much about what other people said, but she said something that really stuck with me. She said, "This is really uncomfortable. I don't want to be treated like, some sort of special foreigner when these kids and their families are living in such, what seemed to us to be, very poor environments." But Abhishek was very quick to respond, and he said, and actually, when she said that, I did agree with her. I did agree with her because it really did feel like being a celebrity, and it wasn't. It was very pleasant at first, but then when you think about the implications of that, it was unsettling. But Abhishek responded straight away and said, "Yeah, but look at the effect you can have on people. Look at how you can change people's perspectives just by being here. You can use that as something for good. So these kids might only spend an hour with you, you know, in one day of their life, and they will remember that, and maybe that's the thing that will remind them that education is a lifelong process and something that they can benefit from to have a better life." And when he said that, I thought, oh gosh, yeah, he's right. So we can't control, we couldn't really control the level of excitement, but how excited they were to see us, but that was something that we could use to really benefit them. In hindsight, I would have liked to have spent more time out in the field. Or there was one other place we went to as well. We went to a manufacturing. It was a village closer to Ranchi. I'm not sure exactly.
There is a city Ranchi nearby.
Yeah, I forget the name of the place, but there was a place where a small village that was home to a manufacturing building that was making products, builder class products. I'm not sure. I know, for instance, the builder class works to train the mothers of these children how to make certain items that they can then sell.
Exactly.
So we went to one of the facilities where they made these products, and actually, I still have one.
Whoa.
I still have this here. It's really, really beautiful. This beautiful thing. And if you can give me 1 second. I had two notebooks, but I still have these products. So I went to the place where they manufactured them, and I still have them. I was looking for two notebooks that I actually had. It looks as though I've given them to my mother. I'm not sure. I did. I moved home recently, and I saw these notebooks, and I said, "Oh, Mum, I had been meaning to give these to you for so long, but of course I wasn't living at home at the time, so it took me a lot longer to get them to her, but finally I did it this year." Yeah, so I still have those products, but seeing what Builder Class does in action was really reassuring. Even though I was there to organize an event and I was essentially an office intern, you could see that what the organization is doing is very real, and that people will really appreciate it. When I say people, I mean the people who are part of this initiative and that they're learning from it. They're gaining something really valuable out of it. And I like that, because in the UK we have government initiatives to tackle poverty, but they're more faceless. They're not really, it's more embedded in policy and legislation, and it's all, not to say it isn't useful, it is successful, because they're looking to measure something very concrete. The structure of what these initiatives look like are a lot more regimented and perhaps less personable, maybe. So seeing a startup have that kind of impact, it was inspiring. It's just inspiring. That's all I can say about it.
You just answered the question that I had in my mind to ask whatsoever about how do I think what kind of impact Builder Class does, but you answered this question beautifully. Thank you for that. And like, am I right that those moments you also could name them as one of the highest and peaks of your experience were here?
Not long after both of those experiences, I was inspired enough as I say as a 22-year-old, as though I've gotten much older now, but at the time, I thought I could stay in India longer. Why don't I stay longer? Why don't I just spend more time being part of this? It's interesting. It's only until as you know, as I've made it very clear, this was a very valuable experience for me. But through conversation with you now, I realize that it really broadened my worldview, really broadened my ideas of what is possible. And it inspired me enough that I didn't want to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked somewhat openly and honestly with some of the students I became friends with. I mean, Abhishek and Sucharita they were like, yeah, of course, why not? I mean, they were ready for me to stay. I'm not sure how serious they were, but I thought about it, and it eventually came to be that I couldn't stay in India. Of course I couldn't. First of all, I didn't have a working visa, and secondly, I had a degree to finish. So I couldn't abandon my master's degree. But now that we're talking about it, yeah, it was a high point. It was a high point for me that I wouldn't say I've forgotten about. I haven't acted on it very much. Well, I'm in the process of finishing my degree now. So as I'm reflecting on everything that I did over the course of those 2 years, and Build a Class in India were part of that, it's exciting thinking about it, actually. Yeah, very inspiring, and I hope that more interns get to spend time with Build a Class, so especially if you're thinking about working in a global context, or maybe business context where you can have an impact on your hometown, or your home country. It's very valuable.
Naturally leads me to asking a question. How would you think, what are the implications and impacts on your personality, or maybe your professional strengths and skills, that changed the way you behave or work or live now back home after this experience?
One of the ideas that I've always had about work was that, well, it's difficult to talk about this without talking about my journey as a student. So, when you're in university education in the UK, you can get lost in this mindset of needing, like, it's such a broad word, needing work experience. You need experience, in your respective field.
Mm.
Or if not in your respective field, in some kind of context, because university is so popular in the UK that a lot of people graduate without adequate work experience, and they're not able to obtain a graduate level job, because that's what people aim for. They want this idea of going to university, coming out of university, and getting a more than adequate job is still very prevalent in the UK. So a lot of people work for that level of attainment really blindly. My psychology degree was very open, and I have always not wanted to follow a conventional psychology path, because people go on to be healthcare professionals of some kind. I'm not interested in working in healthcare as a psychologist. I'm interested in working in a broader environment. So when I was in India, this idea that I wanted to work in a different kind of environment that is less conventional was it was fed by working with builder class. So much so that now it has been 18 months, I think. About 18 months since, you have to forgive me, my maths is appalling, but it's been about 18 months since I finished this internship in India. And my view of work now is that it is essential, whatever you do, to do something that you're passionate about. Now, someone watching this, one person who's watching this might think, well, go figure, that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to follow things that you're passionate about. But that's not what we do. That's not what we do as human beings. We look for careers and try to build a job. But that's a difficult thing to do. So now that I'm towards the end of my master's degree, I'm thinking very carefully about what I pursue. I'm not looking to pursue a career immediately. I would be more... The difference now is that if I could perhaps become involved in a cause like Build a Class again, as long as I was able to be paid something, just something, that would be enough for me, because I'm now much more passionate about certain... It's important to be passionate about whatever you're working on, and being in the builder class environment in India, being out in the field, being involved in the organizing of the event was terrific. Because as you asked me earlier, what were the high points? Well, when we could see that it was working and it was valuable, and it wasn't just, there was truth to all of it. It was authentic. That was really, really powerful. It was enough to make me want to stay in India. So I don't know if I could do that again. If I could get involved in something like that again, and I'm pretty sure I could, I would want more of what I've just described, more passion, that.
What are the either areas of the passion, or, sometimes it's not some working areas, sometimes it's some small things, people you want to surround it with, maybe values. So what are those passions, this experience and whatever experience after it led you to?
Knowing that you're not doing something just for money. Money becomes the secondary objective. And I did not believe that at first, when I was first exposed to an entrepreneurial environment, especially in India as well. I thought that it was money driven. But no, what it's really driven by are ideas that you can have ownership over, where you can make a real impact on yourself and other people. I was lucky enough last year, during the summer, it was August last year, Mr. Abhishek actually came to London and I met with him. And I remember what he said to me when we were in London as well. He said, you just have to do something. You have an idea, you just have to do something and follow it through. Don't feel like you have to follow a conventional path. And don't be afraid. Don't feel like you have to believe what other people tell you. And that meant a lot coming from him. I'm not sure how much, I'm pretty sure you've had these conversations with him also, but he had a career from my understanding is that he had a very promising career in finance that he was not content with. My understanding is that for him, going through the struggles of starting up Build a Class and having to work really hard and graft and not find immediate results, which we look for, which we as people look for, was worth it, because now he and Sucharita have something that is theirs. They've built it and it has an impact, and that is why they will keep working for it. In a nutshell, now I want a piece of that as well. I don't know what that's going to look like. I would not say I'm not very business conscious. I have a background in psychology, so perhaps that makes me, perhaps my advantage is that I am very effective with working with other people, and I believe that. I believe that I'm very effective working with other people. What I would look for now as I go, I'm already out in the working world, but as I go further into the working world, I would like to find out more about how I can find or discover a path where I could not replicate what Abhishek and Sucharita have done, but where I can be equally as driven. I can, maybe have an idea and maybe not be an entrepreneur myself, but to become involved in an entrepreneurial cause.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would be terrific. And I remember something I was telling you about, I told you just now about some of the students who I made friends with, who helped me develop professionally and personally. One student in particular, because we would often talk together and we would say, well, let's tell each other 3 strengths, maybe 3 weaknesses that we have. Well, not weaknesses, areas of improvement that we have. And I remember somebody saying to me, I don't remember what the strengths were, that's not the important part, but he said that you need to, what did he say? He said, I'm an excellent executor, but I need to be more of an instigator. And rather than just some phrase, what he was trying to say was, I'm very good at getting done what I'm told to do, but it would be in my interest to discover for myself what needs to be done and follow that path. Does that make sense?
It does. It kind of obviously leads back to the entrepreneurship in some sense or another. Again, not necessarily being an entrepreneur, but being in this environment.
Yeah.
It's one of the closest English word for that is proactivity.
Right. Yes. Being able to have my own vision, as it were, and being able to productively work towards that is not my strong point, but is something, to answer your question, after being involved in Build a Class, is something that I feel that over the course of my life, that would be something, not just professionally, that would be something that I should explore for myself, because having the opportunity to work with Build a Class nurtured that sort of, I don't know if you want to call it potential, but it's a way. I certainly found out more about myself, and I would argue that it would be, if an intern comes to Build a Class and doesn't learn much about themselves, something has gone wrong somewhere. I'm very firm in that belief, because I learned a lot.
That's an interesting thought, interesting implication, right? There is something I want to perhaps conclude with. You've been working with many different target groups over here in India. It have been students, it have been business professionals, have been children and teachers in the villages, Build a Class team. So if you would choose some of them and hey, someone to whom you'd like to give maybe a piece of advice or a message or a thought that you would like to convey to them, and I guess we can do it here.
To the people that I worked with in India, or the sorts of people that I worked with in India?
You can make it in general, or you can choose some group in particular, or maybe even some people in particular. I mean, like someone you feel like passing a message to, whatever this message would be.
Well, if I could say something, I didn't get very many opportunities to interact with the children who were involved in the business class initiative. So perhaps this is for them and anybody who would want to work with them. If they really can understand that education is going to be a lifelong experience, if they can keep that as close to their hearts as possible, then they will be able to do anything. I think that is about instilling confidence. I would hope that any interns who got the opportunity to work with the children or even the mothers who were involved in the business class initiative, if they can help instill in them some confidence, some self-confidence, I think that would be really, really valuable. Not to say that the Builder Class initiative doesn't do that. Of course it does that. If they can help facilitate that, I think, if I knew that was happening, I would be really contented by that. Because it's something that I would love to do. I would love to go back and spend more time with them. For any intern who has an opportunity to work with Builder Class or any initiative like it, if they can get their teeth into, they need to get their teeth into how valuable this work experience is, but it goes beyond that. If they can be open-minded, as we were talking about some time ago, be open-minded, non-judgmental, and just give their all, what they will learn will be so valuable. Because even if you go home afterwards and you go back to what you were doing, which you most likely will because you have to finish a degree, maybe you had a job there, I certainly did, perhaps they can at some point have a reflection, and perhaps that will change how they regard work and what they work for in life. But more importantly, while they are part of the internship, while they are part of the Builder Class initiative, give it your absolute best, is all I can say. Because that's all you have to do. All you have to do is just bring your best self first, and everything will fall into place. I certainly did. Any challenge I faced, any frustration, any anger I felt, or even when I was sick and I wanted to go home in the first 2 weeks, you still come away with this immensely rewarding experience. I can't think of anything more valuable in life than being open-minded and willing, and just willing to get involved, do something, jump into the unknown and get involved, in Builder Class in India, be on the plane like I did, having no idea what any of this is going to look like. If you can jump into that, I think we'd see a lot better work being done in the world, wouldn't we?
I cannot think of a better way to put it. Then, on such beautiful advice and message, I say that's the best way to conclude this interview. Thank you, Philip, once again for this. You can watch this interview later on, I guess, like next week, being posted in the Facebook group of Build the Class, part by part, and then in the end, the whole interview. And thank you once again. On this point, we will stop airing.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.